Earlier in the week, we talked about how to use the mouse to interact with the canvas. In this lecture, I'm going to show you how to make your applications in CodeSculptor look good. I'm going to show you how to load images. We're going to use images a lot in weeks 6, 7, and 8. When we build asteroids, we're going to have tons of images. It's going to make our game look great. So it's going to get a starting point to kind of working toward that. I'm going to use OneNote and talk a little bit about kind of some background about how this works. Then I'm going to walk you through a simple example of building a map magnifier. And that should be enough to kind of get you going in terms of using images inside CodeSculptor. All right, let's go to it. All right, let's talk about how to load an image into CodeSculptor using Simple GUI. There's only a single command you need to use to actually load something into CodeSculptor. It's the following command right here. It's simple GUI.load image. Now the parameter that is not going to be the name of a file on your hard drive. It's going to be the URL for a file sitting out on the web. So all your art assets are going to be loaded in via a URL here. So down here is an example of kind of a URL, http:// something something. You do that in CodeSculptor using Simple GUI. The result will be this object's going to be an image. And then later on, we're going to talk about how we can actually draw pieces of that image. Just as an example, if we click on this, it goes out and actually it'll download an image into Chrome here. And you can see this is a kind of a picture of a map from the Gutenberg project. If I click on it, it brings up, it's a really high resolution image here. I can scroll up and down here. This is a nice example. We're going to work with this in this lecture. So let's go back to OneNote now. So what are some tips for doing this? Well, there's not anything that's really too difficult in here. In general, you don't have to do much. We're going to provide you all the images you need out on Google Storage. Your program template will contain links to all the images that you're going to need to use. So you don't have to make any images on your own. I know some of you are going to be excited and want to kind of start downloading and using your own images. A couple of quick tips. Always to check to make sure that the URL you're using actually can be downloaded in a web browser. If you can download it in a web browser, then you're good to actually use it inside CodeSculptor. We'll show you in next week actually how to go through and create files inside Dropbox that you can have visible with a public URL and that are downloadable so you can use them inside CodeSculptor. The other thing to remember is that since it's a URL, it may take a couple of seconds to actually download a big image to your computer. And so while that's happening, we've set it up so that any draws that you use with it won't fail, won't stop the program. They'll simply just not draw that image. After you've done the first download, the image will be cached on your computer. Then it should run very, very well. Okay, let's go on and talk about drawing images. So there's one command that you're going to use inside CodeSculptor with Simple GUI to draw an image. And you can go out and look at it in the docs. It's canvas.drawImage. And drawImage is going to take 5 parameters. It takes the image that you've just loaded. And it has 4 things that help specify what portion of the image you want to draw and where on the canvas. The first 2 parameters here specify a rectangle on the image. The second 2 parameters specify a rectangle on the canvas. So how do we specify a rectangle on the image? We specify it using a center and a size. These 2 links. How do we specify the rectangle on the canvas? Same way. Specify it using a center and a size. So those last 4 parameters will each be pairs of numbers. A couple of things to keep in mind when you're actually using drawImage. If you attempt to draw an image before it's loaded across the web, the draw will fail. CodeSculptor won't stop running. It'll just simply keep running until the image is loaded. Second thing is, if your source rectangle, the rectangle over here on the left-hand side, does not lie entirely inside the image, if a portion of it is outside, there's nothing defining it, the draw fails. Again, doesn't stop execution. It just simply won't draw anything on the canvas. Let's go on and we'll just talk real quickly about the example I'm going to show you some code for. So we just saw this picture of the Gutenberg project map. It's very large. It's 1500 by 1800 pixels. We can't draw it all on the screen at one time. So we're going to make a little magnification tool. And the critical issue here is we're going to squeeze the map down by a factor of 3. So it'll be about like 500 by 600. So we're going to draw it at a lower resolution. And then we're going to make an application where if we click on that image, we're going to draw an original resolution portion of that image over the reduced resolution portion. So you can imagine we're going to kind of position a magnifying glass over the image. So to do that, we're going to end up with having two calls to draw image. Let's see, the first call right here, it's going to draw the entire map at a reduced resolution. We'll do that one first, so that's drawn in the back. And then the second call, he's going to draw a little portion of the original resolution image around wherever we click the mouse. So it'll be essentially a map magnifier. All right, let's go look at the code. All right, let's look at some code for building a map magnifier for this Gutenberg map. So I've loaded it here into CodeSculptor. First thing to notice here is that we're going to do simplegui.loadImage, and I've actually given you a URL here. We have quotes around it. It actually expects the URL to be in quotes as a string. It's always probably a good idea when you're first working with an image to just take this and say Control-C, and then pop up a new tab and paste that URL in and hit enter, and make sure it can be downloaded into your web browser. If it doesn't download in your web browser, it's not going to draw. Once we verify that, I've gone through and I've actually got some constants here that help us keep track of kind of what we're going to do when we're doing the map magnifier. I've got the map's height and width here. I have a scaling factor. What I'm going to do is, remember, I'm going to reduce the size of the map by a factor of 3 so I can actually draw it, the entire thing on the canvas. So I've gone through and computed the width and the height of kind of the reduced size canvas. I've got a constant here that's the size of the magnification pane. It's going to be 120 by 120 pixels. And then we kind of set a default initial position for we're going to kind of position that magnification pane to be the center of the canvas. The mouse handler, it's exactly the same thing we used earlier in the week when we were drawing positions of circles on the canvas using clicking. Same thing. This is going to be the magnification position. Let's see what else. So here's kind of the heart of it. We're going to go through and do two calls to draw image. The first call is going to just take the entire map and squeeze it down onto the canvas with a kind of a reduction in the size by a factor of 3. So here we have the image. Here we have this line specifies a rectangle that includes the entire image. Okay, notice the size is the width by the height, and the center is exactly the center of the image. We're going to take that whole thing and draw it onto something on the canvas, canvas width by canvas height, centered exactly the center of the canvas. So we're going to take the entire image and fill the entire canvas. We do that one first because now we want to draw on top of it the magnification pane. So it's the same thing. We have the image, except we're going to draw a piece of it. That's specified by the kind of the source rectangle is specified by these two parameters, the center and the size. This gives me the center and the size of the magnification pane. So I'll just explain this one right here. How do we specify the place on the original image where we want to actually center our rectangle, the thing that we're going to draw? So the canvas is reduced by a factor of 3. So if I click on the canvas, that gives me this position magpause. Magpause of 0, magpause of 1. To get the corresponding position on the image, we kind of have to undo this scaling down by a factor of 3. So we're going to need to multiply by the scale. We're going to need to kind of blow it up by a factor of 3. So that'll give us the center on the original image. The size is simply going to be a square, 120 by 120, on both the original image, that's the source, and on the destination image. That, as a result, will be there'll be no essentially compression. It'll be at full resolution whenever we see it. Go down here, we can see we've created the frame with canvas width, canvas height. We've registered our handlers, cranked the frame up. So let's just run it. So we've got a frame here. This is the Gutenberg map. If you look carefully, you can see here in the center of the canvas, we've kind of blown it up. It's not as easy to see because there's a little more nondescript. Let's click right over here on this text. Now you can see it. And if I click a lot, move around, you can see that I'm getting a blown up version of the map here. So this is essentially the original resolution version of the map. Click over here, you can see kind of this little piece of the map here. One thing to note here is if I click close enough to the boundary, so you can see here I'm getting this kind of magnification pane drawn. If I click close enough to the boundary, the source rectangle, the source square actually goes outside the original image. That call to draw image then fails. Doesn't cause the application to stop. It just says, I don't know what to draw, so I'm not drawing anything. So this is kind of a simple example you can walk through and look at to understand how drawing images works inside CodeSculptor and Simple GUI. It's not too complicated. Like I said, most of the projects we're going to actually go ahead and give you a template where kind of there's some initial drawing of the images there. But if you get ambitious, you're welcome to go and actually play with this, and you can really spiff your games up if you get good at it. Okay, I'll see you back in a second and we'll talk about memory.